Hey everybody, it is Dr. Dickenson and we are live for another live session here on Hacking Teacher Prep. And today with me, I have Berkeley Everett. Berkeley, thank you so much for joining us and thank you so much for sharing your passion, your wisdom, your enthusiasm, and your love of math with our audience today. How are you doing?
So excited to be here. Yeah, so excited to talk about math. And if you're here on a live stream after work, I mean, kudos to you, and I'm excited to get to collaborate with you in the chat and maybe later on Twitter.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely share your Twitter, your website. We want to hear all the ways that we can get in touch with you because you're doing amazing things in the math community. And we want to get started with that. But first, before we get to your awesome presentation, I would love to just hear from you. What brought you into the field of education and how did your passion for math evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. So for my undergrad major was in jazz piano performance, and I had a short career as a jazz pianist. And I enjoyed it very much, but my true calling, many people knew before I knew that my true calling was going to be teaching. And when I started teaching first grade and specifically math, that's when I noticed sort of that feeling that I got when I was connecting with the audience in a jazz performance with my first graders and all the different things that I could do with mathematics to kind of bring their emotions to life and bring their ideas and their passions to life. So I think I wouldn't be as passionate about math if it hadn't been for that musical background and kind of that framework and that expectation for what an experience should feel like really informs how I approach math. It should be fun. It should be collaborative. It's not something done in isolation. It's not boring. And so that's part of the reason that I'm doing math now. And I would say that my current role, so I get to support teachers in Los Angeles. And oftentimes I get to just be a fly on the wall and soak up all the amazing things that teachers are doing, all the amazing things that students are doing. So a lot of the things that people, they say, oh, that's Berkeley's idea. It's not my idea. I try and give credit to all the amazing teachers and kids in Los Angeles. So that's part of my work. My other work is with DragonBox, where we design digital math tools.
Awesome. I love it. I'm a big, huge fan of all of your work. And I love that the math community is all about embracing each other and just creating that fun, engaging space for kids to love math. Let's get them to fall in love with math, right?
Exactly.
So with that being said, Berkeley, we are so excited to have you on the show. Class has begun and Berkeley is going to be presenting to us live on Math Flips and Math Visuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So another part of my story that I think I've changed a lot since I started teaching math. And when I started teaching math, I thought, oh, I'm teaching first grade. The math is going to be so easy. And I was talking about my own experience. And of course, knowing something for yourself or thinking that you know something for yourself and trying to help somebody else learn that thing is very different. And so I realized that there's this beautiful complexity to just single-digit addition that I had, I couldn't just tell my students, I couldn't download it into their brains. And so it became this really challenging task. How do I help these kids bring what they already know about mathematics and extend that and into the more abstract realm that we're more familiar with, I think, in our upbringing as math students, right? So when I started, I thought, oh, the problem is that I have this clear idea of what I want them to know in my head, and I need to just, like I said, download it into their brains. So I started making these animations, and I started a website called Math Visuals. And I'll just show you a little clip from there. Let me pull it up. And these animations were meant to kind of show them what I was thinking. And the problem with that, as you can imagine, was that it wasn't really helping them develop their own thinking. So can you see this?
Yep.
Great. So this is the website that I created, and I was updating it for a couple of years until I realized that it wasn't serving the purpose of developing the mathematicians in front of me. I had these fancy visuals, and here's an animation that you can see. This is one of the, I would say actually one of the better ones, because I'm still asking them what's the same and what's different. There's no one right answer. But oftentimes I was listening for a very particular thing that I wanted them to say instead of really listening to their ideas. So I was kind of funneling the things that I heard into, yeah, that's what I want, and yeah, that's what I don't want. I don't want that. I'm not going to follow that student's thinking. So since then, I've tried to find ways to put them into a position where they're bringing their experiences, their lived experiences, and their full selves to the math class, where everyone feels like they have something to contribute, and we find it like spaces for collaboration and for excitement. So some of the amazing things that I've seen teachers in Los Angeles do are use number sense and reasoning routines, some of the ones I'm going to share with you tonight, to get kids talking and really just let the kids take the lead. And then as teachers, we can sequence those tasks and create this bigger mathematical story. So let me pull up some of these number sense and reasoning routines, and we're actually going to do some together. So get ready to type into the chat. We have a slight delay of about 15 seconds, but we will be reading out some of the items from the chat.
I'll be your participant for tonight.
Yes, thank you. Class is in session. So let me just show you where you can find these things I'm going to be referencing. So on my website, berkeleyeverett.com, you can go to activities. All my stuff is free. Sense and reasoning routines. I have one slide deck for each grade, week each of 5 different number sense and reasoning routines. These are some of the ones that I love the most. But I think that you should figure out which number sense and reasoning routines work best for you and your students and use those. And by no means should you just, I guess, copy exactly what I'm doing. I just hope to get you started with some ideas and make your load a little bit lighter, hopefully. So I wanted to jump into grade 2, and the first week, there's some directions here when you get the slides. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But I'm gonna put this up. This is called Which One Doesn't Belong, and that's about all you need to know to get started. So, Dr. D, you go by Dr. D, right?
Yeah, that's me, Dr. D.
All right, Dr. D, my one student. Which one of these do you think doesn't belong?
All right. So are we I'm looking at your screen. I just see the number sense routines. You need to scroll down.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I need to stop sharing. Let me go to a different one. And as she's answering, I invite you to type into the chat as well to answer the same question. So do we see an arrangement of 4 items now?
Here we go.
All right.
Whew. You know, I'm going to go initially, because I like to garden, I'm going to go with D, the pepper.
Mm.
Do you want me to say why, or just?
Yeah, say why. Yeah, tell me more.
Well, all the other fruits have a hard shell and you can't eat it. So I can't eat the rind or anything like that. So I have to kind of like remove the outer shell.
So this is the only one, you're saying this is the only one that you can eat the shell?
The exterior, correct.
The exterior, yeah. And you know that because you've grown bell peppers, you're saying?
Oh, yeah. I love to eat bell peppers. You got them.
And what else do you garden? I'm curious.
Well, man, I mean, I've tried to grow watermelon for many years. I haven't been successful, but I do have a cantaloupe right now. I've grown peppers. I have not grown coconuts. So yeah, that's kind of an outlier there for me. Let's see what else. I definitely have a lot of tomatoes going on and some zucchinis. And
I'm curious, about how many bell peppers are you able to harvest each season?
Probably about 30.
Wow. And that's how many plants is that?
It's just like 2 or 3 plants.
Wow. That's impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, there's certain vegetables that grow really well out here with the soil in I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it looks
And
like
I'm
Ramona
Mhm.
shared that the blue fruit with a missing slice, she said that one doesn't belong. And I just thought about that. I was like, whoa, wait, she's on point with that, because everything else is a whole and there's a part missing for number B. So I could see that connection as well.
Yeah. Somebody's already had a bite. So now I'm thinking about what students might say about some of the other ones. So,
Well, if I was a second grader, I might say, well, that coconut's pretty hairy, and that one didn't belong because everything else is pretty smooth. Because kids, young children are very tactile, so I could see them making that connection, saying the coconut doesn't belong.
Absolutely right.
Kira said, I see your point, but I can zest the orange. So I'm going to say the coconut does not belong because it is the only one without the color orange.
Oh. Oh, right, because B also has orange. It just happens to be on the inside.
There you go. Yeah, I didn't even, now we're thinking about colors. And coconuts also, somebody's saying something. The coconut only has one seed, but the other fruits have multiple seeds. Oh, wow. That's a great, yes.
Oh, I think, is that T? I think I recognize you from Twitter, Twitter friend. I didn't know coconuts only had one seed.
I did not know that either.
Are they the seed? Is the whole coconut the seed? Now I got to look this up later. Now I have homework. That's awesome.
You could also say the coconut is the only one that grows from a tree. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. The orange, I have an orange tree. Oh, man.
You've got a big garden.
Yeah, I do. I have a good garden. I haven't had any oranges grow yet because the deer come in and they eat my lemons and my oranges.
Oh, no.
But
wait, so the oranges how high are either the deer are very tall or the oranges are nice and low?
It's probably about like 6 feet. So the branches hang low, so they just eat them. And
Yeah.
I'm not into, like, my neighbor is like, you have to put a net around it. I'm like, I don't want to hurt the deer.
Yeah.
I have tried spraying hot pepper sauce, and that seems to work a little bit. I'm okay with that because it's organic.
And wait, on the actual fruit itself?
Yeah, on the entire tree. I guess they don't like the taste of it.
So if you zested that orange, you have to watch out. You have to adjust your recipe.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to pause this right here. We could keep talking about this image, and there's lots of reasons why each one couldn't belong, and we could discuss what makes the other three similar if that one doesn't belong. But I'm curious, Dr. D, for you, how was that if you were a student, how would it feel to participate in an activity like this?
Well, as you could say, it had a low floor and a high ceiling, right? If I was in a mental space to like mathematize it, I could just contribute in other ways. I could talk about my experiences in the garden. I could talk about my experiences eating the fruit or the texture of the fruit. So it was kind of very open-ended and much more like organic in terms of having a conversation. So that felt good. I didn't have to like have the right answer. There was multiple answers too.
Right. And that lowers the pressure on everybody, right? It's definitely sending the message that math is for everybody. If you're doing this during math class, if this is what mathematics is, it feels very inviting. It feels related to things I might see in the grocery store or in a garden, right?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a conversation happening, right?
Right. And then I'm even thinking, and I'm curious for people to type into the chat, what mathematics do you think, if you were a teacher, what notes would you have been taking about things that you might want to follow up later? So you might be, let's say, writing a story problem that you want to pose to your students, and it's going to be about something that you learned about your students, right? Because I learned a lot about you during that mathematical activity in a way that I wouldn't have learned if I had given you maybe some multiplication facts to solve or something like that, right? What are some, so type into the chat, what are some mathematics that you heard that could maybe turn into story problems later? And then we'll come back to that in just a moment. Let me pull up the next routine while you're typing that in. And then if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I know in second grade, my daughter's class last year, they were just beginning to start talking about fractions and shapes. So you could even, have the kids try to express like how many have a certain shape, or what do they have in common, which one's a whole, which one's a fraction, and just getting them to think about those concepts from like kind of like a 360 level. So that way, as you share, they can move into a context, a story problem, where they're actually doing maybe some operations in algebraic thinking. So I could see how that's kind of build into it and create a space for kids to like enjoy math, which is always good, right?
Right. And if we had to summarize the mathematics of elementary school, you covered a lot of it there. Arithmetic with whole numbers and arithmetic with fractions takes up a lot of our time, K to 5, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. And as we see stuff coming into the chat, we can pause and notate that, because what I love about number sense and reasoning routines is that they, like you said, they flow so naturally into other mathematical conversations.
I mean, even in the middle school, as a middle school math teacher, I find that, the kids are coming from all these different subjects, and then they come into math, and we don't really create like that opportunity for them to kind of step into math and get their feet, like get their footing. Like if I'm just coming from an ELA class and I'm learning about grammatical structures or, parts of a novel, and then I move into my math class, and as soon as I hit that, like the teachers hit the ground running with like 10 to 20 problems on the board. And my brain literally has not even switched over to like, I'm in another subject right now. I have to turn my math brain on.
Right.
So I think these types of routines allow the kids to turn their math brain on and to kind of think more mathematically without having that, like, because, as soon as you're in a space where you feel stress or anxiety, your brain shuts down. So this allows that the thinking, the mathematizing to actually happen. Exactly.
And then it all feels connected. And I see T wrote gardening situations for sure. Area and perimeter of the garden. Yep. Measurement, graphing, how the plants grow, right? Over time, maybe. Yeah. I was even thinking about you were talking about how many bell pepper plants you had. And then we could talk about kind of the averages. Like if you have 30, you said you had about 30 bell peppers per season, and you had 3 bell pepper plants, then we could end up talking about a division problem right there, or averages or something like that.
Or ratios.
Yep. Right.
Percentage.
Right.
Absolutely.
And because I like to be absurd, sometimes I might write some problem about Bigfoot visiting your garden and eating it. Maybe you think it's the deer, but actually you've been visited by some monster, and we have to figure out exactly how tall do we need to make those fences. I guess that's a
Berkeley. I'm going to tell you, we actually have a Bigfoot museum out here in Santa Cruz.
What?
So
really?
that would not be too bizarre, and the kids would love it because they're like, yeah, we've been to the Bigfoot museum.
That's amazing. Maybe it is Bigfoot then, eating your oranges. But see, again, I would not be learning this about you if I was doing multiplication facts. So
there you go.
I'm grateful for these types of experiences. So this picture is from Simon Gregg. So thank you to Simon Gregg for this picture. And Camille's saying, how many seeds are in a fruit? Cut and count them, or the weight of the fruit, right? Counting, measurement. Wonderful.
That's awesome. I always find those concepts so abstract. And you get it in a worksheet, and the kids are like, is it a centimeter? Is it an inch?
Yes.
Like, what's the difference between a yardstick and, a meter stick? I don't know, because I've never used any of these things. So I love that Camille's like grounding it into like actually doing something with it.
Right. Let's do it. Exactly. Exactly. That's math. And so you have a week of this for each grade, which one doesn't belong, and there's plenty of resources. You can find other which one doesn't belong. You can make your own. But week 2, something else that I love is notice and wonder. And I think 2 of the most important mathematical questions are, what do you notice? What are you observing about something? And digging into the details of that, but also just being curious. And sometimes you'll answer the question, but just exercising your curiosity and your brain in that way is important in and of itself. So let's actually try it out. I'm going to stop talking about it. And I'll put this question to all of you. What do you notice and what do you wonder?
And Berkeley, how long would you say for those pre-service teachers, new teachers out there, like, do you have that wait time, like that moment of them just like, honoring, like, hey, I don't want you yelling out. Let's give everybody some wait time to think, and maybe, put your hand on your chest when you're ready with 1 or 2 ways, like a number talk to show that you're ready.
Right, absolutely. I think having a hand signal is really helpful. You can see when most people have had a chance to think, and then if it's safe, I have to say that now. If it's safe for your students to turn and talk to each other, that gives everybody a chance, even if they hadn't finished their thinking, to hear what somebody else thought. Maybe that will give them an idea. So that giving everyone, and that gets everyone engaged instantly, because when you're talking and thinking, you're learning. But great question. For me, I think it depends on the person. For me, I wait until I'm a little bit uncomfortable when I think it's been too long, and then I count another 3 to 5 seconds after that, just to push myself. Because from our perspective, we've waited for 30 seconds, but if you look at the stopwatch, it's only been 10 seconds before I start to get uncomfortable with the silence.
Yep, that was always the hardest thing for me, because growing up in Boston, everybody's talking rapid fast.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to bite my tongue.
Yeah. Yep.
Get some good comments. Kira said, "Who ate those 2 cupcakes? We need 2 more to make a dozen."
That makes me wonder if we'd get is it the same price to get 12 cupcakes as it is to get 10 at this place, right? Should I, let's say I only bought 10. Should I have bought 2 more?
There you go. Cheaper by the dozen.
Yeah.
Is it a proportional relationship?
Yeah, right. Here we are with a second grade image, or what I call the second grade image, but that's what's beautiful about it.
I'm going to scale it up to 7th grade.
There we go.
What's the unit price?
Yeah. And Camille says, were the missing cupcakes the same as the ones next to them, or were they different? So what patterns do we notice about how they're arranged? Maybe the person putting them in the box is trying to arrange them in a particular way. 2 spots are empty. What flavors were they? What are certain flavors more popular than others? I mean, we could potentially answer that question. Well, I guess we don't know which ones are missing.
But you could extend it and do a survey with your class, right? And then you'd have some, you can make a bar graph. I used to love doing bar graphs in my 1st grade class.
Yeah. So then what would you, tell me how you'd pose it to your class after this?
I would just have them, categorize each cupcake, maybe by the white snow cap, or the one with chocolate sprinkles, or the chocolate filled, or caramel, or white frosting, and then have them vote on which ones they would want to eat. And then we would collect that data. We put it into a bar graph, and then we could make some, like you were saying, some problems with that. Which one's more, which one's less, how many more? I always see those questions on the SBAC. They always come up, like, how many more people liked the chocolate fills than the white vanilla? And the
Right.
kids, they get stuck on those, so I just feel like the more we can do that in the primary grades in terms of working with like statistics, probability, data sets, the more successful they're going to be in secondary class in terms, especially about even just talking about the data, talking about the math. But now, as you all know, we have the new math Common Core frameworks coming out, and there's going to be a data science track in high school. So even more so now, it's like, let's start laying that really strong foundation so that all kids have success with math, whether they decide to do trigonometry and calculus or they move into data science. And, data science is such a bursting field in terms of like college and career readiness, but also in terms of moving into professional fields in career. So
Yeah. And, I used to despise teaching the data and measurement units when I taught first grade until the end. And I realized somebody let me climb out of the box, and I realized that I was allowed to let my students create their own surveys. And then from then I didn't use any of the prefabricated, graphs that involved, a survey of students that nobody knows and nobody cares about. And then it became actually a more rigorous task because kids had to figure out how to ask a question. What's the right question to ask? Do you give people, like, how do you give people the right number of options so you can collect data on it? And these were things that the first graders were grappling with that I think I had underestimated them. And it made it so much more fun because it was actual data that they were collecting from their families and friends and bringing back, and we were discussing. And then, like you said, those questions that end up on the test come so much more naturally. Oh, which one was everyone's favorite? Or how many more votes would that other one have needed to beat that one out?
Yeah, I think we take for granted how much language is actually in math. Like we intuitively look at mathematics and think about just the operations, just the numbers. But really the key piece of that is unlocking the language, especially for here in California, we have, a large percentage of English language learners. And so math can become like, what's the word I'm looking for? It can provide them with or without opportunities to actually go into college and be career ready because they have gaps in their math knowledge because of that language piece was never addressed.
Right. And how can we turn that around so that language, that extra language that they're learning is a strength and becomes a strength, not only in math, but in their everyday life, right?
So let me ask you a question. You have these wonderful number sense routines. How do we layer in the academic language, especially if I'm a new teacher and I want my students to actually use the language that they can make sense of it? What recommendations do you have for service teachers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and part of what makes these so inviting is that there's no wrong answer. And it's just your perspective and it's how you're explaining it. And I think that, and I noticed this for myself as a learner too, my first explanation is never that great. It's through the revision process. It's through the conversation with other people where I refine my language and I figure out both what I really believe, but also how I'm going to explain it. So if I was in a classroom and students always say many things that are surprising. I occasionally will be able to guess beforehand what they're going to say for an image like this, but oftentimes the majority of things they say are out of left field, which can feel daunting at first, but I think once you get used to it, you become more comfortable with it. And really, it's just what I found is that following their thinking and asking them follow-up questions. So say, oh, tell me more about, like, let's say they say something that sounds incorrect. Say, hey, tell me more about that. And then maybe they'll say it a different way. Or was anybody else thinking something like that? Or is somebody else understand what so-and-so said and can explain it in their own words? Getting the kids to kind of build off of each other or get a chance to kind of try it out, either through that turn and talk or together as a whole class. I think over time, they're going to get more precise. And I think, I forget where I read this. I wish I could quote this person, but that the precision or the academic language is more about being precise in your own language rather than using the correct words. Like
Mm.
it might be better to use a longer phrase that is meaningful to you rather than the correct, associative property,
Right.
multiplication over addition or whatever. Like personally, those definitions and those types of words like add-ins or that kind of thing are way less important than that you can explain in your own words, in your own thinking, how the math is related to your own world. And maybe later, eventually, towards the end of the year, we can say, hey, that thing that you called pushing numbers together, those two numbers are called add-ins. I don't personally use add-ins because I don't think that they're super useful for first graders, for example. But again, it's starting with what makes sense to them and refining it.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. I love that idea. And I think it also, as you shared, it allows the kids have an invitation to get into the conversation as well as their efficacy towards math, right? Because if you're trying to explain your thinking and your teacher is doing some correcting on you, right, and doing some self-correction, you're going to be less likely to participate or want to engage in the task because nobody wants to, not look competent in front of their peers or have that space. I mean, that was me in
Exactly.
Catholic school when I was in
Yeah.
Everett.
That was a lot of us, and it became less of a game. It was less of making sense of mathematics and more about a game of guessing what the teacher wants you to say,
Mm-hmm.
which is rigorous in a different way. It's not mathematical. Yeah, absolutely. So, ready for the next one?
Yes, let's do it. This is
All right.
fun. This
So,
is fun.
yeah, right. I mean, that math should feel fun, should be fun. So the next one, next series of number sense routines are how many, and really you can use the same images. For example, let me show you this one. You can use an image like this, and what's so beautiful about the question how many, and Christopher Danielson has talked about this, is that you are allowing students to choose what to count and how to count it, because you're not telling them what item, we're counting how many bins of raspberries, like they get to decide. So they're choosing the number, or they're choosing the unit to count and how to count it themselves. Now, these are some number talk images that I've created that are editable. So you can actually, highlight these items, and you can delete them. You can move them around. There's different arrangements that you can choose from, depending on the grade. But these, and I'll point out here, these are a little bit more. They're nudging kids toward particular ideas. So it's a little bit more. As a teacher, you have control over the tasks that you give them, and the tasks will nudge them towards a certain thing. So I would probably start my how many with something that's a little bit more open, but then over time we'll move towards images where I might be getting at a particular Common Core standard. So for second grade, this would be fluency of addition within 20. And that doesn't mean that they see it right away as 9 plus 3 like I do. And in fact, I would want them to be thinking about it in any way that makes sense to them and comparing and connecting those different ways first, before I get into my secret agenda for them.
And
Let me
when I
actually.
saw this, I thought of multiplication. So it was
Right.
funny. I was like, oh, look at that. It's a multiplication equation. Like, I love it.
Right. It's actually, now that you say that, it's actually kind of hard to separate mathematics into different categories, because if it's appearing the way that it does in the real world, it's interconnected, right?
Absolutely. And I think some of our kiddos are ready for those types of problems. So it can almost be, I'm not sure what the word is, but if they're ready for that, or they want to bring in their funds of knowledge, because I know some of the times the kids will want to talk about multiplication in the first grade because they have an older sister or brother who is, developing fluency with those skills, and they want to showcase that. So having that space for them to kind of add in their beliefs or their knowledge sense, it becomes very empowering for kiddos.
Right. And that's a spark that will transfer to the other students. Or it's a note that you can take as a teacher. oh, when we get to whatever unit that I want to work on, I'm gonna actually ask that student to share what they were thinking, or I'm gonna bring that idea back. And then it's coming from the students and not from you.
Right.
And anytime, in my opinion, anytime something comes from the students, it's so much more powerful and believable. I mean, it sends the message that
Oh,
you
absolutely.
can do it, right? If it comes from the teacher, they expect that, they think that I know everything about math. So if I say something like, well, of course you know that, but how empowering is it to hear from for them, a colleague, a peer? If another second grader can do it, I must be able to do it too.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
think that was Vygotsky, right? It's the whole idea of like peer modeling and that idea of relevancy, and that if they can they see someone else who's modeling that, it also becomes a task that is something that they can aspire to.
Exactly. And so, and I feel like the more patient I am, the more the ideas uh, end up coming from the students. And so sometimes we feel like at the end of the lesson, we want to make sure that everybody learns this particular idea, but that's just, in my opinion, not how learning works. And so I'm trying to play the long game where, you know what, I'm going to keep bringing tasks that where this idea is embedded in it. And over time, those connections between classmates will be made, and more students will be grappling with that particular idea. So
Great. Any advice out there for those teachers that are ready to take their number sense routines to the next level and maybe want to create their own? How did you
yeah,
do this? Like, how did
yeah,
this come into being?
yeah, absolutely. I think. Well, I guess I have three places that you could turn to. One is the internet. You could type in like hashtag notice and wonder. Not notice and wonder. Notice wonder. You could type in hashtag WODB for which one doesn't belong. And people are sharing these photographs and these images that they've created. So you can pull those, and anything that sparks your curiosity and you think will do the same for your students is excellent. You could take pictures for yourself. Everywhere I go, I'm taking. Oh, I'm like, oh, that's a mathy photo. I'm gonna take a picture of that. And then finally, one of my colleagues, Liz Romero, has her students. She taught third grade for many years, and she would have the students take photographs in their house or in their community, and then those would become the images that she used.
Absolutely. I remember one time I had my sixth graders do that. And I had them bring in a photo from their weekend. And one of the students had a photo of him playing like a tournament event. And then
Oh wow!
it became our number talk for the day, which was
Right,
awesome. But so
right.
empowering for the kids, as you shared, to kind of bring in their own assets, to have them lead, have them
Yeah.
be the facilitators.
Exactly. And I think maybe another piece of advice that I would have is like we have these wide open spaces, and these are the place to start with a lot of the math ideas, in my opinion. But there are also times when we want to use routines that are focusing in on a particular idea a little bit more. Not showing. I try not to show students how to think at all. But we're putting them into a situation where the thing that we want them to notice is more noticeable, I guess. So one of those is math flips, which are these flashcards that are sort of inspired by number talks. Number talks or problem strings are kind of a series of related problems. So you might be familiar with the number talks book, or there's many resources, right? So these are flashcards where on side A there's a problem, and then on side B or the back, instead of there being an answer, there's another problem that's related to the problem that was on the front. So instead of talking about it, let's just do it. This is an example from a deck. Well, I'm not even going to tell you what it's about. You'll figure it out. So Dr. D, will you be my student and tell me on
Okay.
side A, how many and how do you know? And take as much time as you like.
All right. Okay, so I'm seeing 6 in each circle. And there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 circles, so 60.
And I was writing down, so I missed what you said. You had 6 in each circle, and there. How did you know there were 10 circles?
I just counted by twos.
Oh,
So
got it.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Oh, you were looking at the columns here.
Yes.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so you realized that there were 10 circles.
Uh-huh.
And my goal here as the teacher is just to write as accurately as possible what you're saying. Whether it's correct or incorrect, it's really hard to write down things that you know are wrong. And I'll say what you wrote is correct, I think. But when students say something that isn't correct, I write it down exactly as they said it. And I wait for another student to say, hey, wait a minute, which they almost always do.
So you don't give them the answer. You just let the conversation evolve. And then it almost becomes like, I'm thinking as a writing teacher, the writing process, right? It goes through all these revisions until everyone can kind of almost have an agreed upon solution. And I think that's beautiful because it becomes more of a collaborative process than what we may, at least I experienced with math, which was very individualized and competitive.
Exactly. And instead of competing against each other, we're competing against how great can we be together, which is so much less stressful, right? I know you all have my back. Yeah. So you said you knew that was 60?
Well, I'm not 100% certain, but I feel like if there's 6 in each circle, and then I counted the 2 rows of 5, or a total of, I counted by 2s because I wanted to be 100% certain, that would be 60.
And when you say you counted it, what are you counting, or how does that sound?
Well, the first thing I did was I looked at the first, because I'm almost like when I look at math, I go from left to right, like I'm reading a story. So I looked at the first circle and I noticed there was 6 in that first circle. And then I said, okay. And then I kind of like zoomed out and I said, oh, they all have 6 in the circle. Okay. Well, how many circles are there? Maybe I can be a little bit more efficient instead of counting 1 to 1, or counting by 6s. I can see that. Okay, there's 2. I counted by 2s then. So I said 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. To see
that's the columns, right?
Yes. 10 columns. 2 rows with 5 in each. And so that would be 10 circles altogether. So.
And even though I have a way that I would normally do this routine, I think what you brought up, like if you were a student in my class and the thing that you brought up, I think was so powerful, which is like you zoomed in to look at one thing at a time, but then you also zoomed back out and you saw this larger structure that you thought could help you. So if this was my class, we might go down that rabbit hole and we might not even finish the routine the way that I would normally do it, because I think that's fascinating, seeing something as 2 things at the same time. You're seeing both the parts, but you're also seeing the whole in this larger structure that could help you. Actually, let's not go down that rabbit hole right now, but that's an option, right? As a teacher, you don't have to finish the routines. You just, whatever is juicy, whatever's useful for your students, go down that road. So then I might ask somebody else might say, yeah, I got 60 as well. This is how we got 60. And then we go to the other side, side B, and we say, how many now? And how do you know?
Right. Well, for me, I would just subtract out one group of 6.
Are you talking about this group here?
Yeah. And then I would say, oh, there's 54.
54. So you realized right away that there's one group missing compared to what we did on side A?
That's right. And then I know my 10 facts and ways to make 10. So I decompose 10. And I know 6 and 4 make 10. So it must have been 54.
Oh, see, I wouldn't have guessed that that's what you did to figure out that it was 54. So I'm glad that I paused there, right? Because I could have cut you off. So
I think it's revealing of the strategies that you're using, like as a teacher. If I would see, oh wow, they're using their understanding of decomposing numbers versus counting 1-on-1, which would be, maybe they're not at the 2nd grade. They're still working on counting and cardinality.
Right. And sorry, I forgot to mention, this is actually an example from something that I put in the 4th grade deck. So I jumped
Oh,
us from
okay.
second grade to fourth grade. But what you just pointed out is great too. That it doesn't have to be something that you would associate with that grade level, as long as there's an entry point for everybody. And in this case, you could count the small dots by ones or by twos or by threes or by sixes or who knows, right?
Well, I mean, and I think that's the beauty of math too, right? Is that we can all share our strategies, and then, you sharing your strategy, Berkeley, I might try a new strategy because I might say, well,
Mm-hmm.
Berkeley's way was really efficient. He had this really cool way that he found the answer very efficiently. And next time we do this math flip, like, I want to try Berkeley's strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm a student who counted by ones, even on the second image, right, and I counted every single one of those, I would believe you that it was 54 because I had that chance to make sense of it before I heard what you were describing, which can be pretty abstract. Like you're 60 and then you're taking away 10 to decompose the 10 and take away the 6 from and then you have 4 left and put it back with the 50 is what I'm assuming that you did. But if I had time, I would actually ask you. But that's complicated. For a student who's actually counted it, then it makes more sense. Okay, so you could just do 60 minus 6 and arrive at the same answer.
I love that you mentioned that, like, about a student who may not have as efficient strategies, but then honoring that space for them to do what they needed to do to, like, believe that it was, then creates an opportunity for them to learn. Because I think too often as teachers, we want to just give them like that efficient strategy, but not actually like honor where they're at and their
Mm-hmm.
thinking, which, I mean, it's very developmental, right? I mean, that's like developmental thinking. And so if you think about it from like Piaget, is they might not have that abstract thinking quite yet, especially at this age. So honoring that they need to count 1 to 1, and then allowing them to see that, do that, and then providing them opportunities to see other strategies, it just creates opportunities for them to grow when they're ready and believe, like you were sharing.
Exactly. And that reminds me of one of my colleagues, Jen Lawyer, when she taught, I think, fourth grade, she had her students do a counting collection that made it, I think they ended up, it was a little bit over 10,000 or something like that.
Whoa.
And it was a class collection. So the class had to work together to count and document how many, I don't know if it was like, dried black beans or something like that. But they ended up creating this organization system with cups. So they put 10 beans in each cup, and then they put 10 cups together on a tray. And then they ended up stacking the trays. So they built
Oh my
together the
God.
number, 10,600 and whatever. And they could literally see 10 groups of 10 groups of 10 groups. And I'm thinking, like, where am I in the scientific notation,
Right.
right? But whatever, however many groups, right, to make 10,000. That class, built their collaboration and communication skills, their problem solving skills, perseverance, but they also developed a sense for the size and the scale and the relationship in our place value system of a number like 10,000. So
I
counting
love
it's
that.
not just an early elementary thing.
Absolutely. And having taught sixth grade, kids still get stuck on place value, and they still, I mean, I'm just generalizing here, but when they have to read those really big numbers, it can feel very overwhelming, and they haven't had enough grounded experiences. And then you throw decimals into the
Yeah.
story, and it's like, what?
Where are we? Yeah. I still get confused. I still get confused with
Decimals
the big
and
numbers. Yeah.
rounding too. Do you have any strategies for rounding? I know that tends to also be very abstract.
Yeah. Well, so I've seen teachers use counting collections, and then kids will count a collection of items with a partner and write out how they, on a blank piece of paper, show how they counted. And teachers will use it like add-on questions to that. For example, like how many more to get to the next group of 100?
I see.
So that's what's so cool about counting, is it just extends nicely into these other areas with an extra add-on question. Or they might have kids count a collection, and they'll say, well, what if you had to share your collection with 3 people? And then they end up doing division. So any grade, you can use counting plus some extra questions to build their number sense and their collaboration.
Beautiful. And it's visual. It's right
Yes,
there. They can
exactly.
go like a scientist and actually see it, feel it, touch it, believe it, prove it. So
Exactly. Exactly. So I'll give you a quick preview of what the other, like if I was, this would probably be, 10 minute routine I would do with students. And then maybe the next day I would give them this one. So now it's a little bit harder to count, you need some other way to figure it out, but they can do it together, right? It's a collaboration, obviously. This might be the third day, side A and side B. And then hopefully students are starting to notice a pattern here. And you can see there's also some more abstract representations too. And then after doing a series of these, I would ask, what's the same and different about side A and side B? How does side A help you with side B? Or just maybe, what are you noticing about this deck? And kids will start to realize that they can use multiples of 10 to help them solve multiples of 9. So then once that discussion happens, I might say, okay, well, what other problems can you solve like this? And they might generate some of their own in a math journal or on a blank page or something like that. So that's Math Flips. They're all free. I have about 30 decks on all kinds of topics: addition, subtraction, multiplication, multi-digit multiplication. So you can check that out on the website.
I love it. I mean, just that image alone, if you want to go back, it seemed like there was almost a progression there.
Yeah,
a progression of understanding, starting
Absolutely.
with that really visual and, those visual images, and then moving to, as you shared, more symbolic notation, but also providing in that previous one, like a visual to support them and to kind of, it was almost like scaffolding, I loved it.
Exactly. And that's where we as teachers, that's where we have control. Because I think sometimes if we're just asking kids, what do you notice, or letting them solve in any way, it can feel like we've lost our control, or how are we going to get them to the goals that we have by the end of the year? But we have the whole year. And so our power comes from sequencing these tasks so that a story emerges. So the story here is multiples of 10, which are much easier to calculate, help you with multiples of 9 if you realize that you can multiply by 10 and remove a group.
There you go. And you don't have to remember which finger are you going to put down.
Yes, I know. I know that trick. I still get confused on that trick. Yeah, it's a trick. It's not an understanding, right?
And best of all, this is all free. It's on your website. I mean, you don't have to spend hours. I mean, probably like you, spend hours and hours after school creating all of these tasks. You've done it all. It's all aligned with the Common Core. It's developmentally appropriate. It has a low floor, high ceiling. So you can't say, well, you don't even have to differentiate. You don't have to do a 10-page lesson plan on differentiation because Berkeley's already done it for you. There is a ton of differentiation in those tasks, and we got to see it all, and now we know where to go and get it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
This was a huge honor. I'm so blessed and grateful that you got to come on the show and talk to our teacher candidates and your big fan audience out there, that knows you and knows your work and how magical it is in the classroom. Yeah, well, thank you. And I couldn't do it without all of you. So, let's iterate together. You can, collaborate online. And I would love if people could type into the chat what they're thinking about as they're leaving. What's on your mind? Great question. Yeah. And definitely check out Berkeley Everett. You got his website, Berkeley. If you could give us your Twitter. Yes, handle. It's my name, Berkeley Everett, at Berkeley Everett. Nice and easy. At Berkeley Everett on Twitter. And I'm Dr. D at Teacher Prep Tech. Send us a shout out, and you can go to the hashtag Hacking Teacher Prep, because this is what the show is all about. It's taking all the research and building a bridge to best practices in the classroom. Yeah. And can I highlight there, because I think you made such a great point about differentiation. You don't need to differentiate when the task itself is open enough that people can have lots of ways of thinking about it, approaching it, or solving it. So you don't need a 10-page plan, like you said. And that's such a great hack. And I wish I knew that earlier in my career. Oh my gosh. I know, right? Camille left a comment if you want to read it, Berkeley. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about how to work these in every day as a part of my daily math routine in kindergarten. Yeah. And T is saying, love Twitter for the free and wonderful PD it offers. Yep. Speaking of hacking teacher prep, I was doing these number talks during the school shutdowns with COVID, because my daughter wasn't having any math chats every day. So I just emailed all the parents and say, get on the Zoom link. We're going to be doing some number talks. And they loved it. I mean, things like this, like you're sharing, it can easily be transferred into a digital space. You know, you can put an image up on Seesaw and the kids can annotate it. You could put it on a Flipgrid and then the kids can share their thinking. You know, you could put it on a Padlet and they can type their response. I mean, there's so many ways. You could even put it on a Jamboard, and then you can, and like what I used to do for middle school, you put on a Jamboard and then you can even assign it. I mean, of course, you want to have the conversations, absolutely. But sometimes that's not always possible, especially with, you know, current state of how we're teaching today. So leveraging technology to be able to do all the things that you know are developmentally appropriate and work for your kids. Don't stop doing it.
Absolutely.
Well,
and
Berkeley,
if you feel like you're prepping, I just want to say, if you feel like you're prepping your lesson plans and you're spending a lot of time on it, there's probably an easier way. So reach out to your colleagues and
share.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, it was great having you on the show. And I just want to hope that we continue these conversations, Berkeley. And thank you so much for your time tonight. Enjoy your 14-month-old baby.
Yes, I will.
You gotta put a picture on Twitter.
Yeah, I will. When I've ordered a math onesie, so when it comes, I will.
Oh my gosh. Awesome. All right. Well, have a great night.
Right.
Thanks
You
everyone
too. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.